My name's Rodney Mott. Welcome to Clay Talks. Today I have 3 demonstrations prepared for you, beginning with potter bee nests. These creatures make these cocoons in my studio daily. Sometimes before my pieces are out of the kiln for even a week, they will create a cocoon inside my pottery. Thousands of these are all over, and I just have begun to look at them and open them up and see how similar they are to a lot of my pottery in the way that the lines are thrown around and the ridges, very similar to when I make a cylinder on the potter's wheel. So our first warm-up demonstration is going to be to attempt to make one of those wasp nests. We're going to use red clay today. Again, wherever you get your clay, from the ground or from the store, really all you want to note is whether it's a high fire clay or a low fire clay, meaning that a high fire clay you can put into a hotter fire. A low fire clay you have to keep it at a lower temperature. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by making a couple of slabs to try and get the vessel form for the interior of the wasp nest. Simple wedging techniques to get the air bubbles out of the clay, which isn't so important if you buy your clay out of the bag because it's already been through what's called a pug mill and the air's been taken out. In the beginning, my first demo, I'm doing my breathing nice and I'm warming up and I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of making any mistakes right now. I plan to make some mistakes as I begin the process of creating what I want to create. So we're going to make a slab for the interior of the wasp nest. Elongating the clay, making it about 1/4 inch thick. Then I'm going to stuff it with whatever organic material. The potter bee is going to put insect guts in here and string and leaves and all sorts of things so that when his egg hatches, it will have nutrition in there and grow and then eventually break out of its cocoon. There's at times as many as apparently 18 or 20 or 40 of these little eggs inside these nests that they make all over my studio. They make them on bricks. They stay right on the brick. So as an artist, I look at these wasp nests, and for some reason they interest me in ways that make me want to try to duplicate it or make them myself. So we close this up. Stuff our stuff in here. And this stuff makes it so that the slab won't collapse. It has something in there to stay put. So if I was a potter bee, that would be my nest, and I would put my larvae in there. That would be the cocoon, the vessel. Now some of these are little duplexes. They make 2 of them in one. They come in all shapes and sizes, so I think we'll do one with 2 of them. Stick a few little things inside this one so that it won't collapse. Since I don't have too many leaves yet, I'll put my own little baby in there. We'll use these later in the 3rd demo, but for this, right now I need one. So I just put my little baby inside there. Close it up. Now I have 2 cocoons. I'm gonna put them together with a dirt mud slip, using some of the nests as crumble them up and put them into the water, and it creates a muddy, dirty slip that I can put all over my clay, making it so that it'll stick together. Score where the mud is. Now I'm starting to get a little more warmed up, and I'm starting to feel a little like a potter bee making these nests. Today I want to talk about reasons why we create, why the potter bee creates to make its eggs hatch, why artists create, why did the early man go into the caves and make these incredible drawings all over the walls. Why are we creative? Why did we create pottery at first? Maybe to cook with and eat out of. Why did we create clothing first? To warm ourselves. All these creativity, all these creations have become arts in themselves. Culinary arts, fashion design, architecture. Why did we create the first homes? So that they would shelter us. People are creative for certain reasons. In the past, the reasons have been life or death, continuation. Now, what are the reasons why artists create? Are they inspired by the potter bee? Are they inspired by the people that went into the caves and made these drawings? These, after 42 years of being an artist, I asked myself, what is my reason to create? Now, a lot of times, my reason is simply that I am inspired by something that the potter bee makes, and I want to try to duplicate that or make that. Other times, I want to make a pot from the past that looks like a Mesoamerican cooking vessel from 2,000 years ago. The reasons why we create, we're going to talk about that today through all three of our demonstrations. Now, these potter bees have created these ridges around, which they're either using their mouth or their little tentacles that potter bees have. I'm not a potter bee expert, and this may not even be what they're called. They might be called mud wasps. They might be called bees, mud bees. Some of you might know these things, what they are. We might have some information from you that tells us. So I'm going to make some of these little ridges, put some more clay on there. And again, I'm warming up. I'm not critiquing myself. What I'm making is not pretty to me or not pretty. It has no critical value to it. It's a warm-up, like a stretch, like an exercise to get myself going, to get myself beginning to be creative. Now, sometimes when these potter bee babies hatch, they come all the way out, and there's a big hole which they're hatched from. And then on the other side, maybe it doesn't hatch, so it stays empty. And I'll take mud, cover that whole thing up with mud. So when I put it in the fire, there's one that's fired right here, and it's all dark and brown. Sometimes I take the potter bee nests and fire them in the kiln, especially when the potter bee has constructed them on the brick already. So you can see that the natural clay and dirt that they're using fires to 2,000 degrees and becomes very dark. So now, when I make these, they have holes in the back so that they can be wall pieces when I finish firing them myself and I want to place them in a gallery. As the potter bees have made them, usually there's one side that's flat because it's been on the side of a wall or they've made it on something. So that makes it a natural to place them as wall pieces. So I've gone through about 3 or 4 of these and begun to make them with the clay. And I'll continue to attempt to be a human potter bee and work these ridges. And they're a lot of fun. So that's our warm-up demo, Potter Bee Nests. Now we'll move on to the next. For our second demo today, we're going to use a mold. Now, my mold is a mold of a clay mask that I made of my teacher years ago when he was visiting here and we had a face-off. He made a mask, clay mask of me, and then I made a clay mask of him. I liked my clay mask of him and I wanted more than one of them, so I took plaster, put plaster over my clay mask, let it dry, and I had a plaster mold of his face. Now you can find these plaster molds in people's garages. You could buy them. They're birds and pots and faces, masks, all kinds of different ways and things that you can find that are already made with molds ready to go. So you can get any kind of mold you want and use for this demo that I'm going to show you today. The other thing you need to do is find little things that you've collected. Now that's easy for me because I collect seashells and I collect shards, pottery shards. When you walk on this planet, you will be walking on shards. When I go into the quarry every day for my run, I find little pieces of old 100-year-old pottery. They're like little cookies with white icing on either side. Wonderful little things. I find them in 7 and 8 at a time, just in one run. So I collect those. So what I'm going to be doing today is using all these different things inside this mold to create masks. Now I can create smaller little masks that I can use for trays, or I can create bigger masks that I can hang on the wall with. What I'll use for my first mask is some organic material like blackberry vines with heavy-duty thorns on them. Those thorns look really cool when they come out. These vines create beautiful texture and shape in the clay and burn out when you put them in the kiln. It can create some real dramatic areas around the eye and the nose if they're placed in the right spot. So we'll start with some vines of clay. We'll start with some pottery shards. And my students have brought me shards from the island off of Crete, the ocean. So these are 2,000-year-old Cretan handles. These are shards from the Southwest that people have brought me that now are just sitting in bags, so I think reusing them in a fresh piece of art is very appropriate. I take coins, pennies and dimes, put them in. Very random. My old eyeglasses, I think, will be excellent for using today in this clay. So I'll sprinkle like a cook ingredients. This is Kiln, the ingredient that porcelain clay has mostly. So I sprinkle some of that in. This is a pink stain. I'm having a lot of fun right now, and that's probably the most important thing. And we continue to that reason why we create. One of the biggest reasons for me is because I get this feeling of importance when I create. Like I'm making all these decisions, and I'm creating all this fresh new stuff for myself. The reason is not what happens at the end. The reason is right now that my body is filled with this kind of goosebumpy feeling, and the chills are happening all over my skin. That's exciting to me. That's a really good feeling, and that's a really good reason to create. That feeling of self-worth. Anything you want to throw in here. Here's a little plastic Scooby-Doo toy. Sure, throw it in there. Okay, now I'm going to open up my bag of clay. I think I'll use that. The red clay that we used for our first demo. Oh, I have this that I wanted to show you. This is a 100, well, it says 1888 on it. So it was made in 1888. So that's a very long time ago. This is a beautiful little porcelain cup. Could be very valuable. Some of these things that I use and reconstitute are very valuable. So I would take that cup and I will smash it. Now I have pieces of that very valuable cup that I get to use in my mask. Maybe this one looks like it should be used in the nose. I don't warn my wife when I go into the old antique porcelain cabinet and borrow one of these to reconstitute into my art. But I do have, there's about 12 of them up there, so I figure one won't be missing. Okay. It's a little mischievous. There's a little rebellion involved here in some of this art making. Okay, so now I'm going to take my pieces of clay and begin to push it into the mask in pieces. Sort of gluing all this stuff together that I put in. So we're going to put some white clay and some dark clay. I found my wire tool, which is a really, nice tool to use if you want to pull off a slab, more of a slab from your bag of clay, and place some of these right directly inside my mold. Try not to disturb the stuff that I put in there first. So slowly but surely I'm starting to fill in. And again, on the second demo, I'm still not in a worrisome space. I feel pretty easy and relaxed about my decision making and what I'm doing. Again, as I keep talking to you about this act of creativity, it's a very physical act. You're using your body and your mind and your spirit. All of your senses are working for you. Again, in the reasons why we create. For instance, on this National Geographic cover, Where Food Begins, they talk about in Haiti, people use clay to make cakes to eat because there's not enough food. Now, as a clay artist, that's profound to me, that in some cultures, ceramics is being used as a dietary supplement. And the way that this person is creating these clay cakes, there's so much pride in their face, and the way that their handprint, their palm print is on the clay cakes is just really resonates with me, like the potter bee cocoons. It's very interesting. You can actually go online and see these individuals making these clay cakes in Haiti. Do you need to zoom in on that at all or anything? So once I get the clay pretty well into the mold, then I can push into the parts of the mold like the nose and the eyes so that everything begins to work together as one, and I can fire it and it'll stay together in the kiln. Now as I get to the finish of this, let me show you this a little bit better so that you can see the inside. I'll prop this up and you can see that I'm about filled in there, and we're almost to the point where I can take it out of the mold now. Ideally, you'd want to wait, I don't know, maybe an hour or two if it was outside to let the clay firm up just a little bit. What I'm trying to do now is get it to where it catches all those little goodies that I put in there. It goes down in the nose. The nose is right about here. So I need to do a little more pushing in there. So it'll go in there a little bit. Into the eyes a little bit. And one more little coil over here ought to do it. And that's going to catch just about the full face. Now, if I want to release that, because the plaster releases the clay pretty good. There it is. Huh. Let me show that to you. It's kind of wet right now, but we can show you the gist pretty much of what we're making. So it really has a nice face look to it. This leaf, of course, will completely burn out when it gets fired in the kiln. And so much what you have will be more the organic process that you went through to make it. So you'll have your shards, you'll have your penny will burn out, and it'll just be a piece of metal like right here. This was a bullet shell casing that burned out and melted down the piece. There's my eyeglasses. I like it. And again, I'm not real critical of my work. I'm critical of my process and how it feels when I make my work. So again, these are the messages that I'm going to continue to give you. Now, we'll move on to the third demo. Now, for our third demo, we're going to dip some Beanie Babies. Now, acquiring the Beanie Babies can be the most challenging part of this project. I go to antique stores, I beg young children. I don't want to pay too much for them, but these are from China. You've all seen them. They're by a company called Thai. So, first thing you're going to have to do after you get your Beanie Babies is cut off all the tags and the labels. Next, you get a quart of mold slip, clay, porcelain slip, or whatever slip you can get from the craft store. Not hard to get a hold of. You pour that slip into a big bucket. Comes out in clumps. It's really fun. This is a fun part of the process, is pouring your slip into the bucket. When you create as an artist, again, I keep returning to the process that you're going to. It's kind of like playing the game, playing the 9 innings. That's the fun part. All the reporters and everybody else gets to talk about who won or lost. You get to play the game. So when you decide to create, you're in the game. You're on the field. Feels a lot different than being in the stands. So get my hand right in there. Don't be afraid to get dirty. Get the rest of that slip in that bucket. And then I add some water to the mix. Getting it kind of the consistency of, say, buttermilk. So I've got about a 6-inch layer there of slip. And if you want to use a whisk, they work really well too. You prefer not to get your hands so dirty. I prefer my hands as dirty as possible. Matter of fact, I prefer my whole body as dirty as possible. So now I feel a little more comfortable demonstrating in front of you. Now that I'm on my third demo and extremely warmed up, fired up, and ready to really create some fun stuff. So I will pick which Beanie Babies I want to start with. As you can see, I've already been dipping Beanie Babies for quite a while, and you can dip horses and dogs and ducks and elephants and tigers. There's even a penguin over here. At times I'll take the Beanie Babies after I dip them and place them on a ceramic vase that I've made so that they become the little handle for my jar lid. I think I will do the armadillo and this fine doggy here. Cut off his label. So we'll move all of our excess ones. We'll work with this one and this doggy first. So if you've never dipped a Beanie Baby before, it's really pretty simple. You just take it and put it in the clay, getting it completely wet. Now Beanie Babies are especially good for this because they don't absorb too much of the slip. Now you've got a completely soaked Beanie Baby, which you sit up and allow to begin to dry. This is one that I have dipped once, and it has dried for 2 days. And it's now fairly hardened. So when I dip it again and get the second coat, it's not so floppy. It's already pretty solid, so that it takes that second dip real well. And I set it down and I don't touch it, and then within a day it'll dry and I can do a third dip. I do as many as 10 dips on these before I can fire them and develop about a 1/4 inch shell. So the thickness of that shell is particularly important. Like I said, you want about a 1/4 inch thickness. When I do dip the Beanie Babies, I don't just dip 1 or 2 at a time. I prefer to dip about 20 at a time, and then they will all dry together so that the next day I just come through, put the second coat on, and I'm ready to go. The trick is to not touch them after I dip them. That's kind of a colorful one. The way you set them down is going to really obviously influence how they are shaped. So if you prop them up against something, you might be a little happier. If you take the doggy, you can take an armadillo, like say I'll do this armadillo here. Cut off the label. Whatever will burn, you can dip. Because remember, we're doing clay here. We're doing ceramics. So we're going to put these in the fire. If this material that you cover up is burnable, it'll burn. And your piece will come out just a hollow shell. Whatever was inside will burn away. So we're taking this Beanie Baby that was made in China, and we're dipping it in 8 layers of slip, and then we're putting it into the kiln, and we're burning out all that came from China. And what we're retaining is what I call the made in the USA shell of the Beanie Baby. Now I'm going to open up this one. This one has not been fired yet. So I'm going to open this up so that you can see the Beanie Baby inside. So now this Beanie Baby has been dipped 8 times. It has not been fired. So when we crack this open, you'll see that the Beanie Baby is still inside the clay, and all the clay is just crumbling off the clay layers. So that's what you'd have if you didn't fire it. But by firing it, I get just the shell. Let me do another one. I think we should do this rabbit right here. Now, as we talked about in the other 2 demos, there's a reason why people create. And there have been reasons, wonderful reasons, why people have chosen to create throughout mankind. My reason in this project is that I would eventually like to dip about 2,500 to 3,000 of these Beanie Babies, crate them up and take them back to a gallery in China and sell them as small pieces of sculpture, American-made, to the Chinese. Now that part of the project might be a little difficult because I'm going to have to contact a Chinese gallery and get permission to go over there and show these. But you know, at a further day we might talk about how that part of the project is going. Okay, let's clear some of this stuff away. Let's take a look at some of the individual Beanie Babies that I can create. The ones that I have already dipped, I'm going to leave in place because they have to be staying still for a day. Now, this one I'd like to crack open for you to show you that the Beanie Baby is no longer inside. Okay, there's the leg came off. There's the Beanie Baby hollow. You can see the thickness of the shell is about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, so that's a good thickness. All the beanies are out. All the little beads have fired away. because these have been fired to about 2200 degrees. Some of them come out outstanding. I put them in the wood fire kiln, and the flame creates this beautiful orange on the surface of the clay. So there's a fish that I particularly like. Here's a pelican that came out wonderful with a blue slip on it. After I have dipped most of the babies and fired some of them, I'll take a lot of them and color them. I can use red or blue or yellow slips that you can buy in any store. They're ceramic slips. And I think this elephant would be good blue. So I can take that white porcelain clay and take this blue ceramic slip and cover it up with that color. Blue elephant, blue Horton. Ceramic artists are really starved for color because the clay is so brown, and even when you use glazes, they come out to be a certain color of brown. So painters are lucky that they get to use such vibrant colors. They help us a little bit as ceramic artists by formulating these slips that have high color to them. They say to do 3 coats of this stuff. So you get 1 coat on and let it dry, put another coat on, and if you get 3 coats on, it'll be a little more evenly blue for you when you fire it. So that'll be a blue elephant. And then I think I'll do a red bird. But there's a little blue in my brush, so it's a red bluebird. Again, we're having fun together here, troops. We're creating. We're feeling self-important. We're the celebrities. We don't need to watch TV and watch anybody else right now. We're doing it. We're in the game. Because we're making the decision to be in the game. We're not afraid. We're traveling into that cave with our charcoal sticks, and we're going to create the most beautiful animals on those walls, and then our buddies who are out there hunting are going to make an incredible score and bring home the biggest monstrous mammoth that you've ever seen in your life, and everybody in the village is going to celebrate and dance and eat. And maybe it's all just because we went into that cave and created the most beautiful picture of a mammoth that could have ever been created. There are reasons why we created our whole existence, and these reasons still exist. Find your reason to create. You'll be the celebrity in your life. Anyway, thanks for coming to Clay Talks. Until next time, I'm Rodney Mott.